Many of us have had pets that have fallen ill as a result of eating something in the garden that they shouldn't. There are many Australian plants and foods that are quite toxic to animals, but are perfectly safe for humans to eat. Today, I'm visiting Dr. Ross Mackenzie, a veterinary pathologist with a special interest in poisonous plants. In fact, his garden here in the Brisbane suburb of Ashgrove is full of them. I can see we've got a lot of toxic plants around us. I take these quite casually in my stride, but it's a little bit more complicated than what's just poisonous to gardeners, isn't it?
Oh, yes, yes. It's very important to realise that it's the animal species that's important. Various animal species are more susceptible to a particular plant than other animal species. Now, one of the examples is this black bean tree here. I've got the seeds in my hand here, and these are the toxic part of the plant. And if I was to eat half one of those, chances are I'd be hospitalised with diarrhoea and vomiting. But a cow could come along and eat a whole bucket full of these things and not turn a hair. So we're very susceptible, cattle aren't. I really like them.
Now, this is a teaching garden.
Yes.
I understand you've used this for many years for students.
Yes, I taught at the University of Queensland, the veterinary students there for 14 years, and I would bring them here and show them the actual plants growing in the garden.
Ross recently published his life's work. It's an amazing reference guide called Australia's Poisonous Plants, Fungi and Cyanobacteria. I'm surprised to see comfrey in this book.
Well, comfrey is a very commonly grown plant in garden. Comfrey is in a group of plants, the borage family, of which there are a number of major weeds in southern Australia, and they are serious issues for livestock such as cattle and sheep.
As a vet, what were some of the most commonly encountered animals that were poisoned?
Well, I was working with livestock mostly, but of course that's not to say that dogs and cats and cage birds don't get poisoned. They often do. What I've got on the table here is a range of things that we would commonly eat as humans, but that are a bit of a risk to some animals. We're sitting under a macadamia tree here, and I've got a plate of macadamia nuts here. Now, dogs have recently been discovered to be susceptible to macadamia nuts. So a handful would be enough to poison a medium-sized dog, say about a Kelpie-sized dog.
How about some of these other things?
Well, let's take the avocados. Cage birds, if they're fed the flesh, can literally drop off the perch dead because the toxin in the avocados affects the heart function. Onions have a toxin in them, which is a sulfur compound, which will attack the red blood cells of dogs and potentially they could die. Lilies are an issue for cats. One petal or one leaf, if it's chewed by a cat, can damage kidneys. Also, daylilies have the same toxin in them. You can't always save the animal if you don't get them early enough.
Now, this plant is Nardoo and it looks a bit weedy, but what's toxic about it?
It contains a chemical which destroys vitamin B1. If sheep or horses eat a lot of it, they develop brain damage, basically.
But our Aborigines used to eat this.
They did indeed, and they knew how to process it. They would collect the little spore capsules that occur down at the base of the plant and grind them up, wash them with running water, and then bake them into a kind of bread. Burke and Wills, towards the end of their journey in Central Australia, were trying to do the same thing, except they didn't have the clue that they had to process the stuff. So they were eating it raw, and quite possibly the toxin had a bit of an effect on them towards the end of their life.
What do you think home gardeners should do with this information?
Well, the very first thing they shouldn't do, Jerry, is panic. I tend to send people paranoid talking about all these things. But what they really need to do is educate themselves about the properties of the plants they have in their garden, be able to recognise those plants and prevent poisoning by keeping susceptible animals away from the plants when there's a risk.